This is a choral setting of one of John Donne's holy sonnets. These are poetic hymns of praise to God. In this stanza, the poet contrasts his own poor ephemeral art, weaved in my low devout melancholy, with the inexhaustible and immutable goodness of God, all changing, unchanged, ancient of days. In response, the composer offers two contrasting kinds of music: chords associated with God and canons associated with the human artistic creation. Staggered entries, then chords. Canon between soprano and tenor, and between alto and bass. Staggered entries, then chords. Four-voice canon, then chords to the cadence. We'll start by looking at the canons, those traditional manifestations of composerly craft. They are based on a 12-note series, but an unusual one. It omits some notes, E, F, and B, and has two occurrences of others, D-flat, E-flat, and A-flat. It features the perfect fourth or fifth, intervals 5 or 7. Every note other than A and D is connected by that interval to at least one adjacent note. In addition to its intervals, the series features 3 types of tetrachords that are important units in the piece, both melodically and harmonically. It contains 2 instances of 0257, A-flat, D-flat, E-flat, B-flat, and F-sharp, D-flat, A-flat, E-flat. It contains 3 instances of 0157, A-flat, D-flat, E-flat, G, C, D, F sharp, and D, F sharp, D flat, A flat. There is only one instance of 0247, B flat, G, C, D, but that turns out to be a particularly important harmony. In the canonic passages, every note is accounted for in relation to a small number of transpositions of this series. In the first of the 2 canonic passages, a 2-voice canon in soprano and tenor, sharing P9, shifts to alto and bass, which then share P5. Because the rhythmic interval between the voices in this slightly inexact canon is so small, 1 or 2 quarter notes, the intervals formed between the voices are precisely those formed within each voice. For example, in measures 7 through 8, we hear B-flat G in the soprano, then the same interval formed between soprano and tenor. And then the same interval B flat G again within the tenor. The same is true of the tetrachords. We hear them both within and between the parts. For example, the first four notes of P9 in the soprano, A, A flat, D flat, E flat, are heard again between the parts when the tenor enters, D flat, E flat in the soprano, and A flat in the tenor. And then, once again, within the tenor part, A flat, D flat, E flat. This interweaving of notes within and between the parts nicely reflects the poem, which describes itself as weaved in my low devout melancholy. The second canonic passage is a four-voice canon. The soprano leads with the first 8 notes of RP 11. The tenor follows, just as in the first canon, and then the bass and the alto. Once again, the intervals and larger groupings within the melodies recur as harmonies between the parts, a musical interweaving. At the end of the passage, the texture blends over into chordal homophony, and the chord in measure 19 is a segment of P11, notes 5 through 8. They represent a form of 0247, which is the basis for all of the chordal passages. In a vivid musical representation of the text, this harmony, 0247, is offered up by the human artist, the musical weaver, to the all-changing, unchanged God. The chordal passages are a musical crown of prayer and praise to the eternal Ancient of Days. The first of the 2 chordal passages can be parsed into 4 chords representing 3 forms of 0247, if we exclude the first E flat in the bass and the A flat in the alto. The first chord is revoiced, then progresses via I7. The voice leading reflects the inversion exactly, and then T2 to its destination. First chord with E in the bass. The second chord has the same notes. But now E is on top. The third chord is related to the second by inversion. The perfect fifths were on top, with a major second on the bottom, but now the perfect fifths are on the bottom, with a major second on top. From the third chord to the final chord is a simple T2, with each note moving up 2 semitones, the tenor and alto cross. The harmony 0247 can also be thought of as a major triad with an added ninth, or a minor triad with added fourth. If we extract the triads embedded within the 0247s in this passage, we find a progression that starts on A minor, moves to E flat major via a transformation I am calling octpole, major and minor triads with tritone-related roots falling within an octatonic collection, and then via T2 to F major. The initial A minor moves to the concluding F major via L. These harmonic moves have two seemingly contradictory qualities. They are quite distant in traditional tonal terms. No single key contains all three of them, and the harmonic relationship between A minor and E flat major is particularly remote. But the voice leading intervals that connect them are small. The effect of chords that are remote harmonically but close in voice leading distance has sometimes been thought of as uncanny, simultaneously strange and distant, yet close at hand and deeply familiar. In this context, a subtle musical representation of a God who is both remote and yet intimately close to us. The chords representing the unchanging God are based on 0247 type chords and their embedded triads. The canons representing the poetic weaver are based on the 12-tone series. How do canons and chords, human and divine, relate to each other? First, the type of harmony for all of the chords, 0247, is a segment of the series, situated right at its center. Second, the vocal parts within the chord progression are series segments. Most conspicuously, the four notes of the tenor part, G, B flat, C, D, are precisely the four notes found in the middle of P9, which forms the canonic subject. Here is the tenor part in this chord progression. And here is the canonic subject with those four notes embedded in it. The second progression of chords, like the first, is engaged with 0247, but also brings in 0157, another tetrachordal subset type found in the series. It alternates these two chords, 0247 and 0157. These two chords can be understood as related by fuzzy T-4, a relationship the upper three voices enact in a direct way. Just as the chords can be related by fuzzy T-4, the soprano descends D to B flat. The alto descends A to F. And the tenor descends E to C. The soprano part offers yet another form of 0247. The third and final progression consists of just two chords, both members of 0247, A, C, D, E, and D flat, E flat, F, A flat, as we have seen, 0247 is embedded in the center of each series and the canons derived from it. These canons, creations of human artistic craft, offer up their 0247 as the principal source of chordal harmony, just as the poet offers up a hymn of praise to God. If we imagine these chords as a major or minor triad, plus one extra note, we can hear that they are hexatonic poles, harmonically distant in traditional terms, but connected by semitonal voice leading. The first chord, A, C, D, E, embeds A minor. The second chord, D flat, E flat, F, A flat, embeds D flat major. These two triads are harmonically distant in traditional terms, but they are connected by semitonal voice leading, as are the non-triadic notes in these four-note chords. The relationship is uncanny in its description of a God simultaneously high above and close within.